The year is 1057. The place, Coventry, in the heart of Mercia. A damp, chill morning clings to the streets, the air thick with wood smoke and the earthy scent of mud and manure. The town is silent. Not a peaceful silence. A held breath. Behind heavy oak doors, shutters are latched tight. Eyes peer through cracks. Parents pull children from windows, a finger to their lips. No one speaks. They have been commanded to stay inside, to look away, because she is coming. A lone horse's hoof strikes the cobbles. The sound is stark, metallic, echoing off the wattle and daub walls. Then another, a slow, solemn walk. And there she is, Lady Godiva, wife of Leofric, Earl of Mercia, one of the most powerful men in England. She sits upright on her palfrey, her back a rod of defiance, and she is utterly, devastatingly naked. Her long hair, the color of autumn fire, spills over her shoulders and down her body, a living cloak that offers only the illusion of modesty. Her skin is pale against the dark leather of the saddle, gooseflesh rising in the raw air. She does not weep. She does not shiver. Her eyes, fixed on the road ahead, are glazed with a terrible, focused determination. This is not a titillating spectacle. It is an execution of will. The horse plods forward. The silence is a physical weight, pressing down on the empty street. But within the houses, tension thrums. A bead of sweat traces a path down a baker's temple. A young boy, his mother's hand clamped over his mouth, feels her heartbeat thrumming through her palm. The rule was absolute. Stay inside, shutter your windows, turn your backs. Your lady's honor and your own salvation depends on it. Yet, in one house, a shadow moves against a shuttered window. A thin sliver of light appears. An eye, driven by a compulsion stronger than fear, presses to the gap. Peeping Tom. The legend is born in this frozen, breathless moment. But what truly happened on that street? Was this a shocking act of charity, a political rebellion, or something darker? A tale of oppression, defiance, and a single, forbidden glance that would echo for a millennium. This is the truth behind the naked ride. To understand the shockwave, we must first understand the world that created it. 11th century England is a blade freshly sharpened. The Norse invasions are a recent, bloody memory. The kingdom is a patchwork of rival earldoms, each a small kingdom unto itself, all vying for power under a weak king. In the Midlands, the law is not the king's word. It is the word of Leofric. Earl Leofric is a stark silhouette against a brutal landscape, a man of formidable political cunning and military might. He is not a cartoon villain, but a ruler of his time, pragmatic, severe, unyielding. His wealth, and thus his power, is built on land and tax. And Coventry, a growing town under his dominion, is straining under the weight of his rule. His wife, Godiva, is his opposite in every visible way. Where he is political calculation, she is pious compassion. Historical fragments, not legend, paint a picture of a deeply religious woman, a benefactor of monasteries. She moves through the same halls of power as Leofric, but her eyes see the human cost. She hears the grievances not as whispers of dissent, but as cries of desperation. The people of Coventry are being crushed by a herigeld, a punishing tax on every household, a tax to pay for the armies that protect them, a tax that leaves children hungry and futures barren. The conflict begins not in the streets, but in the cold, stone privacy of the Earl's chamber. Imagine the scene. A fire struggles against the damp. The smell of tallow candles and old stone. Godiva, her formal gown swishing, stands before her seated husband. She has pleaded before. This time is different. The tax must be revoked, she says, her voice low but clear. Leofric looks up from a parchment. His expression is one of amused impatience. The tax pays for the walls that keep them safe, for the soldiers who guard their fields. It is the price of order. It is the price of their starvation, she counters. You cannot bleed a stone and expect it to live. The argument escalates. He cites necessity, the constant threat of rival earls, the king's demands. She speaks of mercy, of Christian duty. Frustration mounts. He is a man used to ending debates with a word. Her persistence is an unexpected, irritating knot. Finally, he slams a hand on the table. The candle flame jumps. You ride for these people so fervently? You would bare your neck for them. He leans forward, a cruel, dismissive joke forming on his lips. A way to silence her, once and for all. Very well. If your love for them is so profound, ride for them. Ride through the marketplace of Coventry. Ride, as you came into this world. He lets the words hang. The ultimate dismissal. A naked noblewoman is an impossibility, a concept so ludicrous it borders on blasphemy. Her dignity, his dignity, the very social order that grants them power, would be incinerated. He expects her to recoil, to surrender. The game will be over. But Godiva does not flinch. She studies his face, and she sees, perhaps for the first time, that he does not truly understand her, that he believes the trappings of nobility, the silks, the jewels, the walls of status, are what she holds dear. He has mistaken the container for the substance within. A slow, terrifying resolve hardens in her eyes. She gives a single, sharp nod. So be it. The color drains from Leofric's face. The joke has curdled. The trap, he realizes too late, has sprung on the hunter. The order goes out. The town crier's voice, trembling with confusion, echoes through Coventry at dusk. By command of the Earl. On the morrow, at the tolling of the bell, all citizens shall remain indoors. They shall shutter their windows. They shall turn their backs. On pain of death, no eye shall look upon the lady as she passes. A wave of confusion, then dread, sweeps the town. What madness is this? What is the lady to do? Rumors swirl like fog. Some think it a procession of penance. Others fear a dark magic. The air the night before is electric with fear. And Godiva, in her chambers, prepares. There is no hesitation now, only a chilling practicality. She dismisses her handmaidens. The room is quiet save for the crackle of the fire. The scent of lavender from her discarded robes slowly fades. She stands alone before the cold night air. This is not an act of vanity, but of sacrifice. Each article of clothing removed is a layer of her world stripped away. The protection of her station, the respect of her peers, the very identity of Lady Godiva. What remains is simply Godiva. A woman. Mortal. Vulnerable. As the first grey light of dawn stains the sky, she steps into the courtyard. Her horse, a gentle mare, stands ready. A stable boy, eyes downcast, and wide with terror, helps her mount. His hands shake. The chill of the morning kisses her skin. She gathers her hair, not to cover herself, but to keep it from tangling. It is a functional gesture. This is now a task to be completed. In the town, the bell tolls. A deep, sonorous clang that seems to shake the very dew from the thatched roofs. The final, absolute command. Doors bolt. Shutters slam. Coventry becomes a town of the blind. The first step of the horse onto the cobbles is the loudest sound in the world. She rides. The rhythmic clip-clop of the horse's hooves is a slow-motion heartbeat for the entombed town. Inside their homes, people press their backs to walls, their faces to the floor. They hear only that sound, and the whisper of the wind through the empty street. They imagine the scene, each in their own private theatre of dread. A woman they revere, exposed to the indifferent air. A terrible, sacred silence is their only shield for her. Godiva feels the gaze of 1,000 unseen people. The pressure of it is a physical chill, colder than the morning. Her skin is alive with sensation. The coarse hair of the horse's maner under her white-knuckled hand, the bite of the metal bit she uses to guide her mount, the terrifying vulnerability of her own exposed flesh. The world has narrowed to this lane of cobbles, this line of shuttered windows, the arch of the marketplace ahead. Her mind is a blank slate of purpose. She does not think of Leofric. She does not think of the future. She thinks only forward. But in one house, on a street overlooking the marketplace, the silence is cracking. Tom, a tailor, is a man of small curiosities. He is not evil. He is ordinary. And the weight of this forbidden moment, the sheer impossible tension of it, has become an unbearable itch in his soul. What is happening out there? The command was irrational. The secrecy is a key turning in a lock deep within him. His wife, her face buried in her apron, weaves prayers. She does not see him slowly, so slowly, rise from his crouch. His hand, trembling, reaches for the wooden shutter. The latch is cold. He hesitates. The clip-clop is getting closer. He must see. He must. It is a compulsion beyond reason. He pushes the latch. It makes a tiny, deafening click. He freezes. His wife looks up, her eyes wide with horror. She shakes her head, frantic, silent. But it is too late. He opens the shutter a hair's breadth. A sliver of dusty light cuts across the dark room. He presses his eye to it. The view is narrow, framing a patch of the muddy marketplace. And into this frame, she walks. Tom's breath stops in his throat. He sees the proud arch of the horse's neck first. Then the rider. The fall of crimson hair. The pale, stark silhouette against the drab browns and greys of the waking town. It is a vision of such shocking, unnatural vulnerability that it feels less like voyeurism and more like witnessing a sacrilege. This is not the body of a wife or a lover. This is the body of a noblewoman, a creature of immense power and status, rendered utterly powerless. It is a sight that dismantles the world. For a second, perhaps two, he looks. And in that time, a story is born that will eclipse history. Legend says he was struck blind instantly, that his eyes shriveled in their sockets as divine punishment. But let us stay in the reality of the moment. What did he feel? Not lust. Likely not even pity. It was likely a profound, gut-wrenching terror. The terror of having broken a cosmic rule. Of having stolen something that was never meant to be seen. He would have reeled back, the shutter snapping shut, plunging the room back into darkness. But the image is now seared onto his mind, permanent, damning. Godiva rides on. She does not look up. She does not see the open shutter or the eye within. She completes a circuit, the marketplace giving way to the narrower lanes, and finally to the gates of the Earl's compound. The ride ends where it began. The compound guards, their eyes averted to the dirt, rush forward with heavy woolen cloaks. They envelop her, their rough hands careful, urgent. She dismounts, her legs stiff with cold and tension. She does not stumble. She walks, wrapped like a corpse for burial, back into the hall, back to her husband. Leofric is waiting. The man who issued the impossible command now faces its impossible fulfillment. The air between them is charged with a new, unthinkable dynamic. She has done it. She has called his bluff and transformed it into a monumental act of will. He looks at her, this woman he thought he owned, and sees a stranger. A force. Without a word, he knows his part of the bargain is due. His authority, his word as Earl, is now publicly, irrevocably, tied to hers. He sends the order within the hour. The Herigeld on Coventry is revoked. The news ripples through the shuttered town like a shockwave. Doors tentatively open. People emerge, blinking, into the daylight. They look at each other, not with celebration, but with a hushed, bewildered awe. The tax is gone. Their lady has done this for them. But at what cost? The air is thick with unspoken questions. Who saw? What was seen? The relief is profound, but it is stained with a deep, communal shame. They had obeyed, but the very act of having to hide, to participate in this ritual, has marked them. And what of Godiva? She does not emerge to cheers. She retreats. The woman who displayed such fearless defiance in public now likely collapses in private. The psychological toll of such an act is immeasurable. The adrenaline fades, leaving raw exposure, not just physical, but spiritual. She has torn down the inviolable wall between the noble and the common, the sacred and the profane. She may have won, but the victory feels like ashes. We know from historical record that Godiva and Leofric continued their patronage of the church. They founded a Benedictine monastery at Coventry. But one must wonder, what was the temperature of their marriage after that day? Did he look at her with new respect, or with a seething, unspoken resentment? Did she look at him and see the architect of her humiliation, or a man bound by his own word? The chronicles are silent. They tell us of land grants and deaths, not of private silences across a shared table. And what of Tom? The legend of Peeping Tom does not attach itself to the story for another 2 centuries. He is a later invention, a moralizing footnote added by monks to reinforce the lesson, the sin of curiosity, the price of looking. But in our search for truth, we must ask, was there a first witness? Someone who broke the command? It is not only possible, it is probable. In a town of hundreds, the chance that every eye was averted is vanishingly small. Perhaps there was a Tom, and perhaps his punishment was not divine blindness, but a human one. The crushing weight of his neighbor's knowledge, their silent accusation. He would have become a ghost in his own community, the man who stole the lady's sacrifice and made it a spectacle. His life, in its own way, would be extinguished. The ride fades from immediate memory, hardening into local law. But the bones of the story are true. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and other documents confirm Godiva's existence, her piety, her influence. They confirm Leofric's power. And they confirm, most tellingly, that the oppressive tolls on Coventry were, indeed, lifted. The naked ride, then, is not a fairy tale. It is a political act of extreme theatre. In a world where power was owned through grand cathedrals and mailed fists, Godiva understood the power of a singular, shocking image. She weaponized her own vulnerability. She turned the societal rules that bound her, the modesty, the dignity of her class, into a catapult to launch her plea. She forced her husband, and all of Coventry, to see the human cost of power by making herself the ultimate symbol of cost. But at its core, this is also a story about witnessing, about the difference between looking and seeing. The people of Coventry were commanded not to look, but they saw the consequence, their lifted burden. Leofric was forced to see the steel in his wife's soul. And Tom, the phantom in the story, represents the dangerous, transformative act of looking itself, the glance that can fossilize a moment into myth, and condemn a man to be forever remembered not for his life, but for a single, fatal curiosity. The truth behind the legend is not a simple truth. It is a knot of power, gender, sacrifice, and sight. It leaves us not with a clear moral, but with unsettling questions about the prices we pay and who is forced to pay them. And as the centuries roll on, the story grows, changing shape to fit new anxieties. But the core image remains, haunting and potent. A woman, alone on a horse, riding through a silent street, bearing the unbearable weight of a community's salvation on her bare shoulders. But what if the most chilling part of the story isn't the ride, but what came after? What if the legend we tell is a carefully crafted veil, hiding a truth far more dangerous to the powerful men of the time? The dust of Godiva's ride settles. The tax is gone. But in the quiet that follows, a different kind of tension coils through Coventry's halls. The act is too large, too disruptive, to be simply absorbed. It must be explained, contained, and, ultimately, controlled. Leofric walks the parapets of his compound. The wind carries the smells of the freed town, baking bread, forging iron, life continuing. But his jaw is clenched. His wife's act was a victory for her, for the people, but for him? It was a public checkmate. In the brutal chessboard of 11th century politics, a lord's authority is absolute, or it is nothing. A wife's defiance, however noble its cause, is a crack in the foundation. Rival earls would hear of this. The king would hear. They would not see compassion. They would see weakness. A man who cannot control his own household cannot control a earldom. He must reclaim the narrative. Behind closed doors, the story begins to be shaped. Not in writing, not yet, but in murmured conversations with his thegns and priests. The emphasis shifts, subtly, from her defiance to his mercy, from her shocking demand to his magnanimous concession. It becomes a story of a pious wife's earnest plea, and a stern but just husband's compassionate response. The naked ride is minimized, hinted at as a strange, fervent penance she insisted upon, a woman's eccentric devotion. The blinding of the hypothetical Peeping Tom is a useful addition. It introduces divine punishment, framing the entire event within God's judgment, not man's politics. It turns a rebellious act into a moral fable. Godiva herself likely retreats further into religious life. The monastery she and Leofric found becomes a sanctuary, but also her cage. Her immense wealth funds its stone walls. Is this her sincere devotion, or a politically safe outlet for a woman who has proven too powerful, too unpredictable? She becomes a benefactor, a shadow behind veils, her radical act slowly being sanded down into sainthood. Years pass. Leofric dies. Then, in 1067, Godiva dies. She is buried with honor in the priory they built, but the world into which she is buried is shattered. 1066. The Norman Conquest. William the Bastard is now William the Conqueror. The old Anglo-Saxon aristocracy, the world of Leofric and Godiva, is being systematically dismantled, replaced by Norman lords. Coventry's new masters have no interest in the legends of a dead Saxon noblewoman. Her story, for a time, flickers, kept alive only by the monks in the scriptorium, copying old chronicles. Then, nearly 200 years after the ride, the story erupts back into the light. In the 13th century, a monk named Roger of Wendover writes his Flores Historiarum, Flowers of History. He records the tale of Godiva's ride, and it is here, in his ink, that Peeping Tom makes his first, definitive appearance. He is named, given a motive, and given his blinding. Why now? Consider the world of the 13th century church. It is an era obsessed with order, with the great chain of being, with controlling not just actions, but thoughts. The sin of curiosities, morbid, unhealthy curiosity, is a major theme in sermons. The original story of Godiva was dangerous. It showed a woman wielding immense moral power through a transgressive act. That was a problematic message for the medieval church. But a story that includes a Peeping Tom? That changes everything. Now, the central lesson is no longer about a woman's sacrifice against tyranny. It is about the sin of looking. The moral is for the common people. Obey authority, keep your eyes lowered, do not inquire into the affairs of your betters. Tom's blinding is a perfect, terrifying object lesson. The story is neutered, transformed from a political thriller into a cautionary tale about knowing your place. Godiva is sanitized into a near saint, her nakedness an unfortunate but holy necessity, like a martyr's pain. The real, complex, powerful woman is buried under layers of moralizing varnish. But what if we scrape that varnish away? What darker truths might whisper beneath? Some modern historians propose a more unsettling interpretation. They look past the romance and the morality play to the brutal legal realities of the time. In Anglo-Saxon law, public nudity was not just shameful. It could be a legally prescribed punishment for women, a form of scolding or humiliation. Could Godiva's ride have been, in part, a coerced penance? Not a bargain, but a sentence? Leofric was grappling with more than a nagging wife. Godiva's piety often translated into the transfer of wealth, their wealth to the church. Land, treasure, resources. To a ruler, this was not just charity, it was a draining of his military and economic capital. What if her advocacy for the people as tax relief was the final straw in a long conflict over her control of their assets? What if the bargain was in fact a cruel ultimatum? You wish to play the benefactor with my wealth? Then do so in the most degrading way imaginable. Let the people you champion see the cost. This casts the silent, shuttered town in an even more horrific light. They weren't just giving her privacy. They were compelled to participate in her ritual humiliation, to be complicit in the breaking of their benefactor. The lifted tax, then, becomes not a victory, but a form of hush money, a way to ensure the town's eternal silence and gratitude, to bind them to Leofric through a shared, guilty secret. And what of the famous hair? The legend says it covered her body like a garment. But this is a later, romantic addition. Early accounts are stark. She rode naked. The hair is a modest Victorian invention. Accept the earlier, harsher version, and the image becomes one of absolute exposure, absolute vulnerability. This was not a picturesque tableau. It was an act of devastating psychological violence. Then there is the question of the root. The marketplace. Why there? It was the economic heart, the seat of the very commerce Leofric taxed. But it was also the place of public punishment. Whippings, stocks, brandings. Was Godiva's ride, then, a perverse parody of a criminal's walk? A symbolic stripping of her social standing before the eyes of the economic body she sought to protect? The long-term fallout is etched not in documents, but in the very evolution of the story. The fact that it was so aggressively moralized and controlled by later male chroniclers, monks, suggests it needed to be controlled. It was a story that, in its raw form, was too potent, too subversive. It showed a woman's body not as an object of lust or shame, but as an instrument of political power. That was a terrifying concept. Even the name Godiva itself echoes with meaning. It is derived from the Old English Godgifu, meaning gift of God. Was her ride her ultimate gift? Or was it a gift forced from her by the worldly powers that sought to contain her? The priory she founded stood for centuries. Pilgrims visited her tomb. But in the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII, even that memory was physically shattered. The priory was destroyed, her tomb lost. It was as if the Tudor state, another regime built on absolute control, delivered a final blow to a story it still found dangerous. The legend of Lady Godiva is a palimpsest, a parchment scraped and written over many times. The earliest layer, a record of a real event, a lifted tax. The next, a political drama of sacrifice and power. Then, a moral fable about curiosity and obedience. In the Victorian era, it becomes a titillating romance, painted in soft focus by artists like John Collier. In our time, it is a feminist symbol, a story of agency and protest. Each era finds its own truth in the naked ride, but the core image remains, disturbing and compelling. It forces us to ask, who gets to tell the story of a woman's sacrifice? Who benefits from the way it is told? And what truths are we, like the people of Coventry, commanded to shut our eyes to? The ride lasted perhaps 20 minutes, but the struggle to own it, to explain it, to sanitize it, has lasted 1,000 years. Perhaps the real Peeping Tom is not the man at the window, but history itself, forever trying to steal a glance at a truth that remains, stubbornly, just out of frame. Because when we look past the legend, we are left with a haunting silhouette. A woman, a horse, a silent street, and the chilling possibility that the greatest act of defiance in early English history may also have been one of its most profound acts of violation.